Welcome to the If You Could See Me podcast. I'm your host, Erin Mahone. I'm an author, storyteller, facilitator, and mental health professional. I believe that mental health is health, and it goes so far beyond conversations about illness, medications, and treatment. When I set out to create this thing, I had no idea what I was doing. Just that I wanted to share my story, and I hoped I wasn't alone. I discovered that so many people need to find solidarity. They need to know they aren't alone. Well, I'm here to tell you, you are not alone. Enjoy the show. Hello, friends and family. It's me, Erin Mahone. I just wanted to share a little bit of information with you before we get into this episode number 4 of season 3 of the If You Could See Me podcast. First and foremost, thank you all so much for continuing your love and support of the project. The episode you're going to hear today is from our live event on October 11th, 2019 at the CSZ Theater in Richmond, Virginia, which is the home of Comedy Sports. We have been recording shows there since this was our first event there, and we will have numerous events there throughout the coming year. And I'm really excited about this new aspect of our program. I wanted to put out an enormous thanks to Dave Gow and everybody over at the CSZ Theater for their incredible support of the project so far and for our continued collaboration. As always, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Mental Health News Radio Network. This is an incredible platform, and we are so proud and excited to be a part of this family now in our second year. This project would not be possible without all of our incredible volunteers. They make our events possible. To my magnificent husband, Keith Mahone, who is also the producer of this podcast. Want to shout out to Nona Drumheller for taking our event photos, Tam and Alan Harrison for their house management and general all-around support during our events. They are really amazing folks. Sadly, during this show, we did have some technical issues, and it was the first time I was recording one of these shows for the podcast in this way, and it was a really good learning opportunity. Unfortunately, some of the elements of the show that night did not make it to today. So I tried everything I could to recover the lost audio, but it's just not there. And try to take this as an opportunity to accept that something given in the moment is sometimes best served in the moment. So we will take the stories that we heard from some of our participants that evening and hold them close and be grateful that we saw them in the moment. The only thing that survived that evening was our interview with Cheslea Higgs Wise, which you are going to hear momentarily. I did before we get started with Cheslea. I wanted to give huge thanks to the ladies whose stories were shared that evening that we unfortunately didn't get to hear. Lucretia Anderson, Tammy Oslins, Jamie Rivas, Sandy Tobias, and Donna Joyce. They shared a bit of themselves with us that night, and their words were incredibly powerful. Each of these women has been on the stage in the past or is preparing for a future show, so you'll have the opportunity to hear them soon in other forms. In the meantime, check out our YouTube channel to hear many other stories from the project. You can, as always, find us online at ifyoucouldseeme.com, on our Facebook page, the If You Could See Me Project, at IYCSM, on Instagram at #IfYouCouldSeeMe, and on YouTube at the If You Could See Me Project. That's so much stuff, all that stuff that we need to make sure you know so that you know where to find us and so that you can continue contributing and being a part of this awesome work. So I'm going to move on with the show and tell you a little bit about the wonderful individual that I got to talk to that evening. Cheslea Higgs Wise is a clinical social worker. She has a master's degree in social work from the Virginia Commonwealth University. She's a facilitator who creates equitable communication strategies for people from all different walks of life. She facilitates dialogue on the topics of race, politics, feminism, and sex. Cheslea is an experienced advocate and inclusion educator. She's passionate about dialogue and deliberation for attitudinal shifts and evolving structural approaches specifically aimed toward racial justice and gender equality. You can find Cheslea on her website, www.chelseahiggswise.com. She is a remarkable woman doing amazing work in our Richmond community and beyond, and I am so excited to have had the opportunity to have this really wonderful, enlightening, eye-opening conversation with her. Thank you so much. Enjoy the show.
First and foremost, was there one thing that happened in your life that drew you to social work and activism, or did it happen gradually?
Good question. So I decided I wanted to be a social worker my sophomore year of college. I was at University of Richmond. I was actually a huge science geek, and in the later 90s, 2000s, there was a big rush for trying to get minorities in sciences, STEM. And I was one of those like smart people that passed the test. I was in Chesterfield County Schools.
Me too.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, they like, you belong in STEM. So I really put all my all into physics, got all the scholarships. Well, my sophomore year in college, long story short, and if you follow my story, you've probably heard this before, that I switched majors from physics to social work and entirely switched schools from University of Richmond to Longwood University. I did that very intentionally, and talking about the intersection of me, of being a presenting black woman. Many times I introduce myself as a biologically biracial, politically black woman. So when I walk in a room, you see a black woman, and that's how society treats me, because race is a social construct, and so what constructs me is a black woman. And so social work became a way of serving the people that I had always been connected to. And my freshman year, I had one of those instances at University of Richmond where I got shown that I wasn't just a mixed woman. I wasn't just mixed. I was a black woman. And that took me into social work. Social work is called, especially in between social workers, we are the champions of social justice. We're not just here to take away your children or give out food stamps. I'm here to bust that myth. And so for about 10 years, I was in social work, direct practice. I was labeling individuals with psychiatric diagnoses. I was providing treatment plans. I was connecting the resources, figuring out what do you need to do to survive. How can you just make a living in order to keep a sanity of mental health, right? The reason I was with these people is because they qualified for mental health, but the truth is that the systems were provided to where they just could not survive. So I am a case manager. I am a holistic connector. I need to know everything, every resource possible for the people I'm interacting with in order to give them the lifestyle that they deserve. And I just got tired, Erin. And it's interesting, so I always talk about the differences between a micro conversation and a macro one. A micro one being something of individuals. That's what I was doing for 10 years. I was giving out micro services. I'm going to connect you to this. Make sure you have this. And in 2015, you asked me if there was one thing, and I'm going on and on, right? But
No,
as we do.
Is there one, or was it slow?
No, so
you're
yes.
answering correctly.
So there was not one thing. There was a progress of life, as most of it is. And in 2015, I was also realizing I had jumped into the American dream. I had gotten a husband, a house, 4,000 square feet, a picket fence, legit, like in a beautiful school district. Had a child. She was 1 year old at the time, and I remember looking down at her, and an incident had happened within the family, and I just realized that this young girl was going to be looking at me as her biggest woman role model. And I was able to admit in that moment I was not happy. I was not happy enough to fake the life, to continue confidently to say that I was ready to model this for another young black woman that was going to grow up in the United States of America. I left my marriage. He's a great man, great father, but we were just not it. And that's when I just started coming out. Coming out as a black woman, coming out as sex pause, coming out as body pause, coming out as I'm not sure I'm Christian, coming out as just questioning everything I had been taught. And Aaron, it just like, women specifically started diving into my DMs, like, thank you for saying that. Thank you for talking about being a mom. Thank you for talking about being a working mom. I have a master's degree in social work, so I am considered very educated and articulate, especially for a black woman. I get told articulate. That is the most racist thing you could tell a black woman, by the way, is that how articulate they are. And so I realized in 2015, as I transitioned my life, that the country was also in a huge transition. As a mental health provider, I was seeing black bodies, black women, black men in the streets being killed by police. And that hit home to me. I didn't really know why, but I after years of self-inventory, I realized that growing up in a single mother home, my father was heavily addicted to substances, and he and my stepmother were actually incarcerated for years due to nonviolent drug offenses, addiction, and poverty. And I just saw that on the news in the streets. And in 2015, while I was making my transition, coming out, being truthful, I just got pushed in these realms of tell your story, right? Just like these beautiful women had done before, earlier today, just telling your truth. And I realized that my experience, my education in social work, my connection to the community, because I'm born and raised right here in this Richmond area, means that I am a voice for progress. And I continue to connect and be in proximity with community, so I continue to do that. So when you asked me, was there one thing? It wasn't a thing. It was an era of my life, right? And I'm still trying to find that. But yes, right now, today, I'm now a social worker in macro work. I own my own business. I am currently completely sufficient off of my own contracting in my own business, being a racial equity facilitator in the South, which is a dream come true. It's exhausting, but a dream come true. So that's a very long answer to your question.
That's a very good, awesome, wonderful answer.
Thank you.
It's always nice when you can ask a question and then a person can just tell you their whole life.
Yes.
It's really, it makes for a good interview, that's for sure. So I think a lot, like, obsessively about mental health and about our communities and about a lot about what you talked about with micro and macro. What I consider this to be is both micro and macro, very intentionally.
Right.
And I want to know, when you think about inequity and you talk about the inequity that happens in our communities, whether it's racial inequity or it's socioeconomic inequity,
Yeah.
where are the intersections between that and mental health? Because I don't think that we adequately, understand that in America, the greatest privilege is peace of mind. And peace of mind shouldn't be a privilege. And so where do those things cross? And what are your sort of thoughts about that enormous thing that I just dropped in your lap?
Yes, definitely. Well, this is what I do for a living.
All right.
So drop it there. So you talked about inequity. So let me talk about equity first. First of all, equity right now is a very trendy word.
Sure.
And I say trendy because it's something that makes people feel better, and it's also something that you can get a lot of funding for if you're doing work in equity. Equity comes from banking in numbers, right? So when we're talking about racial equity, gender equity, just marginalized equity, many folks try to separate the two of equality, equity, and then that numbers piece. So I want to very intentionally connect the two of, if we're talking about equity, inclusivity, we're also talking about numbers and money because we live in a state of capitalism. But how do those intersections come about? First of all, we are all loaded with different types of intersectionalities that make up our personality. And I remember listening to some of the storytellers earlier talking specifically about like when to wear which mask. And it's so important for many people to interrogate their own space that they're in to figure out which mask that they have to wear at that moment. And so when we're talking about intersectionality, we have to understand like which groups and which bodies we have to uplift first. So I'm coming on here, and I talk a lot about race. I talk a lot about just being transparent, but I usually do this in crowds that I'm a little bit more familiar with, to just create a safer space for me. And I think that's what it kind of boils down to, is when we're talking about any type of intersectionality, we want to make sure that we're thinking about all the types of intersections, whether that's race, gender, differently abled. We're talking about sexuality. We're talking about economic pieces. It's just so individualized that it's really hard for that piece.
Well, you know, I think that we don't understand. You understand.
Try.
Our world is really hard on our mental health.
Yeah.
And the more intersections you have,
Yeah.
the more that, you know, is a weight or a barrier. And I genuinely want us as a community, as a society, to think about those impacts.
Right. So the mental health piece, right, thank you. That was a long question. So today is World Mental Health Day.
It is.
October 10th, by the way.
That was totally unintentional, by
Really?
the way. It was.
Seriously?
It was totally unintentional.
Do you know this woman contacted me in March asking me about this? And I was like, oh, World Mental Health Day, that's what this is. Of course this is what it is. So last year...
I wish I was that planful, guys, but I'm just not.
You should just own that, girl.
That would go against my brand.
Transparency. So right now, actually, intentionality and intersectionality, it's a really interesting piece because I am running ragged this week because last year, due to mental health, World Mental Health Day, some comrades and I actually created a week called Black Mental Health Week, and it's this week. I have events going on right now at another location about Black women called Enough is Enough. And we did that very intentionally, like almost disrupting World Mental Health Day with the entire week just talking about Black mental health to point out how our coping mechanism and the expectation of us to cope with our mental health just comes with the territory of every space that we enter, because every space is created by whiteness and by a white lens. Thank you. But that we have to realize that comes from every intersectionality, right? So if there is a queer person that walks in, there's somebody that's differently able, they're going to come in with the lens of this. What does it do to their mental health to just have to navigate the spaces? So right now, Virginia is out of the top 10 cities for highest eviction rate. Virginia has 5 of them in the nation. When we talk about food deserts right here in Virginia, we have, right here in Richmond specifically, we have a 20-year difference in life expectancy based on your zip code. If we can't layer in the mental health complications of that, when we're talking about equity and policy and programs, if we're not also thinking about how people are just having to cope with everyday survival of their oppression of their systems, Yeah, that's the mental health piece
That's
of
the
it.
mental
It's you're
health
not always diagnosed.
Nope.
You don't always understand. It's just a stressor, and it's due to your environment. It may not be chemical. It may just be environmental. It may be systemic. It may be the genetic piece because your ancestors were beaten and enslaved to the point where now it's in your DNA that you are oppressed and feel that trauma.
Thank you for speaking to that and bringing light to it. I think that it is, I believe firmly that, you know, mental health is every part of our lives.
Right.
You know, we don't get to escape it. We don't get to choose whether or not we talk about it or live with it or accept it or whatever. You know, like Tammy said before, you cannot accept it
Right.
and still struggle. But at the same time, it's not always a bipolar diagnosis.
Right.
It's, I can't feed my kids. It's, I can't pay the rent. It's, I don't know how I'm going to fix my car so I can get to work. That weight, and that, you know, I mean, look, I posted something a couple of weeks ago on my blog about, you know, the financial turmoil that my family went through after the crash of 2008. And that fear of not being able to feed my kids, of having to give my house to the bank, of having to, you know, tear off the mask and, you know, put myself out there in the world as a person who had failed. I had failed. That is terrifying and defeating and depressing and hard. And talking about it is also terrifying and hard, which is why it took me 10 years to talk about it. But that is just, I still get to operate in the world as a educated white woman. And it was that challenging for me to go through that. It took me a decade to recover from that fear and that anxiety. I spend money and it makes me panic. That doesn't ever go away.
Right.
That's mental health. That is your circumstance impacting your mental health. Okay, sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, it's great. I mean, thank you for recognizing your privilege in that statement as well, right? And I'm going to do a really shameless plug that I forgot to do in the beginning. So Erin mentioned in the beginning of taking out your phones. I would also encourage you right now to take out your phones. Go ahead, get them.
Get them. Do it.
And subscribe, whether it's SoundCloud or Apple, to my podcast called Race Capital, and capital with the O as in the Capitol building, because I talk about place, space, and time, and that place right here in our capital city is important. And every episode, I have a segment called What's Your Privilege? And I ask every guest I have on there about what their privilege is, no matter their color, age, just identity. We all can recognize certain privileges that we have in this moment. So, shameless plug. I appreciate everyone for doing that.
You're going to get a chance to plug all your stuff in a minute.
Thanks.
So
Perfect.
don't. All right, so we had a thing happen this week
Okay.
that I want to talk about because we're all here and everybody loves Ellen DeGeneres. Okay? Okay, and I constructed this question, so I'm gonna read it.
To read it correctly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where is the line between accepting one another's differences while holding each other accountable? Because we should always be holding each other accountable. Abuse is not acceptable ever under any circumstances. And completely shutting people out.
It's a good question. So we could tag team this, but why don't we put out some context
Sure.
for what happened with Ellen this week?
Yes.
And help me if I've forgotten anything.
Yes, ma'am.
So Ellen was going to see a football game, and she was in a box seat because she has all the privilege in the world, right? And, you know, going to be around all the rich and famous folks. And she did one of those selfie videos. And within the video, it was able to see that she was surrounded by conservative politicians, specifically the Bushes, like legit, like sitting next
Right
to
next to her, smiling and happy.
the former president that like came out against her right to be gay, to be married, to live openly, to get a job. She didn't say that in the video, but but that's what the video was. And this week, we know specifically, Tuesday was a Supreme Court hearing about whether or not you could be fired for presenting and being identified as LGBTQ. So that discrimination is at this point up to question, as well as if it's going to be protected or not within our Constitution. Right. Now, here in Virginia, we've never had that privilege. You can still be fired. In Virginia, you could still be fired for being gay. And they could, boop, boom, done. So as the country talks about that, literally, right, kind of.
You got a lawyer up here.
Right, so, right. And we're still in at-will state, right. So they could fire you for that at will. But it's never that we've had that specific protection. So that's what happened. And many people started asking her, and she came onto her show, right. Talked about it, and basically did her speech about being kind.
Right. And she can be friends with all different kinds of people, and even people who completely invalidate her right to live as a free and openly gay woman in the world.
Yeah.
And the world exploded, and right.
People are questioning Ellen now.
Right.
I mean, that's huge, right? So right. I'm going to be 100 transparent. I was not paying attention to this Ellen mess right. this week. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't. I saw that people were getting upset about Ellen. I saw the narrative. It was that, why can you be kind to someone that wants to, see your destruction within your oppression? As a black woman, welcome to my existence. So that was not something I was following, clicking on, and I do try and keep myself up to date. Aaron mentioned it, and I was like, okay, let me just look at this over, and I was not surprised to see that it was the same narrative. So just to be clear, answering your question, sure. You just want me to respond to this piece.
I want you to talk about, well, what I want is to have a larger conversation about where's the line.
Okay.
What are we accepting and what are we not?
Yeah.
And what are we fighting for if we're not fighting to be hopeful for a world in which people are kind to one another?
Right.
All of the white supremacists that I have seen who have, Christian Piccolini and I can't remember, the guy whose father started the thing and then he went to college. Who? No, not David. No, well, they're affiliated, but it's not David Duke. But anyway, I'll look it up and I'll put it on Facebook because I can't remember it right now. But, they said that the thing that was most powerful to them that they were faced with both total unacceptance of their views with kindness, with education, with an opportunity to learn a different point of view, but they were given the space to become a different person.
Yeah, yeah.
And so how do we do that?
I really appreciate you saying that about giving the space. And my response is, speaking to this mic, what a privilege.
Yep. And that's why she's here. Because I don't even see that. That's my lens. My lens is that I don't see it. I see give the space. We have to tell each other's stories side by side.
Right.
Because that's not my answer.
Right. I spoke earlier about being a politically black woman, right? I love Ellen. Isn't she a safe, comfy space to go to on the afternoons? Seeing her dance around, giving out money, saying be kind to one another. And it's a comfy place. So 2019, here in Virginia, is officially the year of reconciliation and civility.
We've done a really good job.
Now, I'm going to be really honest. Every time a white person says to me to be kind, I hear the word civil. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why are you talking to me in that tone, Cheslea? You can't possibly think I'm going to hear that when you're talking to me with that facial expression. Cheslea, no one's ever going to listen to you if you come in like an angry black woman. Be kind. These people may be putting your entire existence on the line, but be kind, Cheslea. So 2019, we are celebrating the 400th year of 1619. Who can tell me what 1619 is about? Just yell it out. Ha!
First slaves.
First enslaved people are coming to Virginia, right? As slaves, right? So in 1619, a boat stopped by Hampton, dropped off blacks and whites, rowed up to Jamestown. The Jamestown people, the white Englishmen that were there, purchased black people from that ship, which is what made them enslaved, because they were purchased. And here in Virginia, we have been celebrating the 400th year because of the House of Burgesses that was created. Our entire democracy started right here in Virginia 400 years ago. What a thing to be proud of. Let's celebrate that. And talk about the first enslaved people to be here. As we celebrate the 400th year of the first House of Burgesses and what they've done for our country, can we also not attribute to them the inequities that we face today? So give them that credit too. If you want to celebrate them, give them the credit to creating and constructing. We talk about social constructs. They constructed the inequalities that we have today, 400 years ago. Celebrate them. Sure. But everything good about this country, the fact that we can sit here right now, the fact that you and I can sit here, the fact that I am your special guest, only comes because certain people decided to be uncivil. They decided to not be kind and fight for their own liberation. It's been years and generations now, so we don't remember that. We didn't experience that, so now it's joyful. It's beautiful. This is equality. This is inclusion. But we don't remember the times where we had to be unkind in order to make this world good. Everything good about the United States came from a time of incivility as well as being unkind to one another. So when you ask me about Ellen and where is the line, I look at you and I ask, well, the line has been crossed. A white woman is making millions of dollars off of the narrative of being kind, where I literally lost my entire existence in April, my entire contract, my life, the way I feed myself and my child, because they said I was unkind to democratic politics. So I was not surprised when the world and Twitter went crazy, because they finally realized that the kind narrative is a major eraser of what makes our country great. It's a privilege not to see that, not to feel that, not to have to hear it, not to have to experience it. For her to be able to go on TV and explain, we can all be kind no matter what. When I got the news today that there is a women's summit next week based on the American evolution. The same people that are celebrating the 400th anniversary and have been celebrating the House of Burgesses, and they have now hired Queen Latifah to come and play for the Women's Summit. They just announced it today.
Well, that makes it all right.
We got our black engagement.
That's right. It's done.
And
check that
check.
box.
In October of the year of the 400th commemoration, in the former capital of the Confederacy, we finally have a semi-narrative, a beginning. The day before is the Tuesday next week. No, it's Monday, I'm sorry, of next week, where we are celebrating as a Commonwealth the first rendition of the exposure of the Woman's Monument on Capitol Square. First monument dedicated to women in the country that's on public Capitol grounds. There are 12 women being monumented, and tomorrow, next week, 7 of them will be unveiled. We are so distracted. We are so siloed. We are so oblivious. As we talk about Monument Avenue, as we talk about Kehinde Wale that's coming in VMFA, do y'all realize that the Woman's Monument is building another Confederate statue? One of the 12 women was a Confederate officer. She was the doctor. She was named an angel of the Confederacy. But I promise you, here in Virginia, what we will say is, well, look at all the other women that are monumented with beside her.
We can continue.
We can
to
continue
commemorate.
on.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And in the feminist movement, that's what's been happening for over 100 years, is let's see what we can do for all of the other women except for the marginalized women. And if we're talking about those 12 women on that monument, imagine them living and being in one space. Would that be a safe space? Would that be a brave space? Would that be a space of honor for those other 11 women?
What makes you, as we end, because I could literally.
I know. I was
listen
like,
to
I
you
didn't
all
know
day
how
long.
much time we have. I'm
It's
just
all
going.
good.
Yeah.
We're good, because I just want to listen to you all the time. And what makes you hopeful?
Oh my gosh. Moments like this, these spaces, you know, the space that Ellen created is fantastic because it is a safe, a welcoming, a validated one. Mm-hmm. But what this is, what we're doing tonight, is another model of how to do that same space that's inclusive and joyous and laughter, but it's also progressive. And that's what gives me hope, is that I don't know many of you all from face to face, but now I'm getting to meet people that Aaron called me 6 months ago and was like, do this thing. I'm like, yeah, of course.
You to be on stage with me.
So I am incredibly hopeful. And the fact that, like I mentioned before, I'm able now to make a living off of this as a Black woman is also hopeful.
Yep, that absolutely is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been so
Thank
amazing.
you.
Oh. So I'm going to put all your stuff up on our Facebook page so that everybody can find you and they can follow all the amazing work that you are doing. Before you leave the stage,
Oh, yeah.
I was going to do that, but we have blown out over our time.
I talk a lot, y'all.
No, it was perfect. And I also just want to listen, and I don't want to manage the conversation. So who is in the back? Tammy? Okay, good. Chelsea, you get the privilege of picking 2 names out of the hat tonight. Before we leave tonight, we have 2 folks who, if they're still wanting to do it, they're going to come up and tell a story. So, dun, 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 dun.
First one, yes, is Donna Joyce.
Woo!
I know Donna.
Yay, Donna!
Second one is Sandy. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Everybody give Chelsea a round of applause. Awesome. All right, so everybody take a deep breath. Take a stretch. Okay, hold on 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves. See, this is what happens when you are your own producer. You just like do the thing and you try to make it work for everybody and you hope that you don't turn the microphone off. Okay, so Donna Joyce is an amazing writer. She is an awesome storyteller. She is in my Restory class on Monday mornings, and I could not love her more, and I am so excited that her name came out of the hat. So please come up and join us on the stage. Okay, now all you have to do is hold this in front of your face, okay. But only hold the handle, don't push any of the buttons.
Okay.
And
Yeah. All right. I need to talk about masks. Is that correct? I can talk about whatever I want. Whatever I want. Okay. I will talk about whatever I want. I don't do this very much. I don't stand up and tell stories very much, but I want to do that. And one memory that's been coming up for me lately is something that I always felt kind of numb to and thought was petty. When I was 9 years old, I went to an assembly with the rest of the kids in the 4th grade, and we were told that we could play an instrument, and if we wanted to play an instrument, one from the many that were on the film that we watched about instruments, that I could go up and tell the band teacher or the orchestra teacher what instrument I wanted to play. So I did that. I said to the band teacher, Mr. Starr, I want to play the drums. And he said, you can't play the drums because you're a girl. It even sounds ridiculous when I say it, right? But it was just flat out, you can't play the drums because you're a girl. Another instrument? So I'm like, guitar. And he said, there aren't any guitars in the band. And then he talked to somebody else. This man was not an old man. He was like 30 years old. It was 1975. I looked up the date that Title IX was passed, the special legislation that would bring equity to students of public education. It was 1972, so 3 years before. Apparently it didn't mean music. And it was not part of the assembly that I participated in, that we gendered musical instruments, but the drums apparently was special. I don't know if he just didn't want to talk to my parents about the drums, or I don't know. I don't know because I didn't ask. Because at 9, yeah, I was a child and I already knew not to question it. Anyway, I did pick an instrument. I'm a word kid. I'm one of the smart girls in school that has a very special, narrow landscape. I'm sure there's many smart girls in this audience that were kind of pushed to what success is supposed to look like. So I liked the word cello because C, sounding like ch, so cool. It's not it's not a very good way to pick an instrument, especially when you're 9. It's very big. And it's not as big as the bass because I knew I couldn't carry a bass, but a cello is pretty heavy. And I forgot it at home many times. It's also a very somber instrument, so I didn't play it very long. And a friend of mine my friend Wendy talked me into playing the violin with 3 other kids. And it's not that fun. I mean, I didn't have that much fun. Maybe other people do like it. It's a nice instrument to listen to when you get the hang of it, but in the beginning, it's just not fun like the drums would be. The drums would be so much fun. But I never learned how to play the drums. And every time I thought about this memory, I would think it's petty. You know, it's just the drums. I don't even know how to play the drums. I don't know none of my family members played any instruments. So just put it down. You know, what's the big deal? But when I looked at it, when I looked underneath that big shell on top of it, I was like, whoa, ow. They told me I couldn't do that because I was a girl, and there is nothing else that I let hold me back as a girl, because I knew that is what I was up against. It was never said to me like that before, but I knew it. I felt it all the time. That drum story makes me think about when I was in 1st grade, and I was the smart girl already. I was 6 years old. I was reading above average in 1st grade. I was filling in the blanks of what the word was supposed to be in these special books with the acetate and marker. And I got up to book 14, but there was a boy in class that was also reading above average, and he got to go on to books 15 and 16. And I'd heard the conversation around me about that. I was going to get 14. I do not remember telling my family about this at all. I don't remember them ever talking to me. I'm sure they were happy that I was above average reading, and it did afford me the privilege that I wasn't paid attention to. Like, she's fine, which means I knew my family could not take care of me in the way that I needed. And so by being the smart kid, I didn't have to deal with them. And this is a totally different story, and I'm not going there right now, but sorry. I'm like, oh, turn, I don't want to go there. Okay. In any case, I'm now looking at all the places that I felt numb about in my childhood. There's a lot of them, apparently. And I see myself numbing myself to things all the time. And I'm trying to write them all down. And apparently I'm going to make a lot of stories with them. Also, I wish I had known this about myself or known to look in these places. No one wants to support that. I am so glad that something like this exists, talking about mental health. That is part of my mental health. I don't want to numb myself to anything. I want to live it, and it's tough to do that. Anyway, thank you for listening.
And now you can breathe. And I will stand here and hold this microphone. So that is not actually projecting sound, which is super weird. I get the privilege twice a week and a couple of times a month to sit with groups of people who are dedicated to learning to break through that shell, to get underneath of it, to figure out how they feel about things that they were always told weren't really important. And it's the greatest privilege of my life. Donna walked into my class not that woman you just saw before you. She's done incredible work. She has put one foot in front of the other, and it's like watching your kid get up and play the piano. It's like, oh, look at that. All right, we're almost done. Our last storyteller of the evening almost didn't put her name in the hat. I didn't have anything to do with it getting chosen. You saw that, right? Everybody, please welcome Sandy Tobias.
I get this decorative. It's very decorative.
It's not decorative.
Okay.
It actually has a purpose.
It does. It feels like it doesn't.
Well, when you hear your lovely voice on the podcast, you'll know that it has a purpose.
Okay. Well, I won't do that.
Hold it regular.
Okay.
It's not a mirror.
Okay. My name is Sandy, and my mom is dead. And I hate that fact. She died unexpectedly, not quite 5 years ago. And it's awful and terrible, and you go through all the grief. I assume some of you have been through something like that before, and I'm sorry that you're in the club. But I just realized, just this week, luckily in a room with many of these women right here, that in almost 5 years, I've missed the second stage of grief. We all hear about the 5 stages of grief. Well, the second stage is anger. And I don't like being angry. I don't like confrontation. I'm like most people. But it has just occurred to me how angry I am at my mother, how disappointed I am in my mother. Because she smoked, and she never stopped. And then one day she had a heart attack and died. And I don't like being angry. It feels rude to be angry at my mother. She's not here to defend herself. I'm sure she wishes she hadn't done it. So I've spent this entire week working on being okay with being angry and disappointed. It's not rude. It's normal. It's an emotion. And now that I can have it, I can move on to another part of grief, because grief doesn't end. It's not linear. It's never over. I'm never going to be fine. But I can't tell you how much having a space like Aaron provides, when this just came to me out of nowhere on Sunday, that having these people around was such a blessing, and they could help me work through it. Something that I had been taking almost 5 years to even acknowledge to myself. So be with your people, talk to your people, and love them.
It's my magic stick. Thank you. She just handed me my magic stick. You guys don't have any idea what that just meant. You don't have any idea. That was like... You are all amazing, and I have loved spending this evening with you. Thank you so much for coming, for sharing your stories, for sharing yourselves, for being a part of the movement. Please continue to stay involved with us in whatever way you are so inclined. I love you all. Have a wonderful weekend.